Hello everybody. My name is Aniket Kate. I'm an associate professor here at Purdue Computer Science Department, and I'll be the official host for the CERIAS seminar for fall 2025. Uh, so, the just some information about the how we'll be running this course before we get into the first talk today. The first thing is that unless we say it explicitly, most of the session for this semester will be on Zoom, but we might have some session in person, but we'll always have a Zoom channel on for those sessions as well. But we expect that for the in-session things that if you can show up, please try to show up. It will be really good that if you can show up even in a couple of minutes before 4:40, 4:30, sorry, so that we can get the seminar started in time and give so that you also don't miss out on some important details in the beginning. So try to attend early enough. Bit more details in general. So you all must have received an email from Mike Focus, who is managing the course, and uh, this is a pass fail course only. So the only criteria that we'll be looking at is the attendance, and we can certainly say that because of all sort of things, there could be some lectures that you may not be able to attend. But we have put some rules in that. For example, you can miss two at max two lectures or the two seminars, and you should not allowed to miss more than that if you want to pass the course. And even for the seminar that you miss, it is expected that you listen to the videos that we have generated for them, and write a short summary about that and submit that via email to Mike. The email that you have received from Mike has details regarding that, but if you have any question, you can contact me or Mike, or just use the Brightface interface for that purpose. Mm. Is there anything else? Yeah, so I think we all by now have got used to the Zoom etiquette. If you have questions, we typically give our speakers time to present whole thing, and then we'll be collecting your question. There's a Q&A that you can use to pose your questions, and then you can will make sure that we go through this question. And today, Professor Staff is going to go through this question and pick some of the questions that we'll ask to the speaker. There is a chat, I think, that's available to you guys, which you can probably use to discuss some technical things that you want to discuss with some other attendees. But try to put your questions in Q&A if you can. I already see that somebody is asking some question here. Okay, I think we'll be just using Zoom feature to take the attendance. It will be taken automatically. It's not that we have to fill up any sheet or something like that. All right. Typically it's a 50-minute talk, and we give around 40-45 minutes to our speaker, and then rest of the time we'll do Q&A and closing remarks, whatever we are coming. Okay, so those are the all information that I could think is relevant to the course. If you have questions, you can, even if you have question to me, you can use that Q&A box or just email to me and we take care of that. But we can now go forward, and I'll hand over to now Professor Stafford to continue from here.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. The start of a new academic year, start of the semester, and we've got a grand start to this particular seminar series. We've been offering these seminars now for over 35 years. So it's got quite a history. And our speaker today is Nick Selby. And Nick and I were reminiscing about how we've known each other for about 20 years now. And he's had a number of roles during that time. He's worked in law enforcement. He's worked as director of research for some companies. He's founded companies. One of the areas where we had some intersection, besides his law enforcement, is doing work with child protection and the National Child Protection Task Force. And he has continued to be involved in cybersecurity in a number of different roles, as an investigator, as a proponent, as a public speaker, as a founder of companies, and today as our featured speaker in this CERIAS seminar. If you're interested in more, His bio is on the website, and he's going to talk a little bit about it. But we're going to turn it over to him and learn about why we should build things properly. Nick, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Gene, and thanks everybody for coming. There is going to be a place where I'm going to ask people questions in the middle, just to see. It's sort of a find Waldo kind of thing. Where's Waldo? But you'll know when it happens, and it's not absolutely critical that everybody answer. But we can just use the Q&A in the just like we will later. So hi, thanks very much for having me. I want to actually start with a case study to talk about what it is that that I'm proposing is something that in your careers doing information security or even just technology more broadly, that you remember and see that this all these things actually can be done, and when they're done well, it's actually quite remarkable the results that you get. And it always surprises me how few organizations in the world really do build things properly. I was speaking a little earlier to a friend, and I mentioned that, isn't this obvious? And and she said, I would actually start by saying I shouldn't have to explain this, but I really do. And the fact that I've now got a company that consults technology organizations on how to do these things, and we really get a lot of business because this stuff isn't that obvious. So I think that if some of these things strike you as new, or some of the dynamics that I talk about strike you as new, just realize you're certainly not alone. In fact, you're in the majority. It's always very difficult to find people who are dedicated to building things properly. So weirdly, for the first time, I think in the history of ever, I'm going to point at a government organization as doing things right. This is the New York Police Department. I worked there from 2018 to 2020. I'll tell you a bit about myself, but in a couple of slides. But I just wanted to start this. So if you're not from New York, or you're not familiar with New York, it's a very big city, 470 square miles. There's lots of rivers. It's a very, very complex environment. There are multiple tunnels and bridges going under and over the water. There's a tramway. The NYPD has a flotilla of police boats of various sizes. From they have divers. They have a beekeeper. They have actually a bunch of beekeepers, because in the summertime it usually happens that bees get somewhere. So they've got beekeepers. They've got people speaking hundreds of languages, and 77 precincts across the city. It's a $5.6 billion budget, and there's no money for anything. It's more data than I've ever actually seen in a commercial setting. Just the 10 million 911 calls a year, and all the computer-aided dispatch data that goes to dispatch officers and take the reports of all those things. It's a massive data lake. There's also 35,000 police officers who really they take their leadership, as you'll find in your careers. Leadership about technology, certainly about information security, comes from the top. Most of the people who are in positions of leadership at the NYPD became cops in the 80s and 90s. They didn't need no computers to tell them how to do their job. They don't understand why anybody else does. So you've got 35,000 people with 10 thumbs. They're just generally distrustful of information technology. But their information security program recognized also that, and I'm sorry, I throw in one more complexity. The NYPD also operates, and this is where I used to work, a full-fledged intelligence agency and counterterrorism operation. And that was created after 9/11, when they said, okay, we're never going to count on anybody else to tell us when we're in danger. We're going to figure it out ourselves. They have officers stationed all over the world. They function like an intelligence agency. So they're under constant attack. And their strategy was, stick to the basics. We have no money. We can't buy all the tools in the world. So we will count on the things that we can do without a lot of money, which is configuration, patch management, threat intelligence, aggressive segmentation. Never seen anything like it. You're sitting in an office with 3 other people. You're on your own little network segment, and you walk outside the room, and the next office, there's another one. Lateral movement is very, very difficult. Everything is SSO. They only spend on the tools that they absolutely can demonstrate that they need, and then, and only if they can't strong arm a vendor who makes other things that they're buying into giving them a SIM if they do. So they got one from IBM. At the time, they were using QRadar because they were a big IBM shop. They did put both CrowdStrike and Mandiant on every machine for EDR, but they will try to save money in every way because there just isn't a lot of it. They're very creative. When they were trying to go from no mobile phone to mobile phones back in 2017 or so, 2016, they found that none of the major phone manufacturers, Android or iPhone, they didn't have any, they weren't CGIS compliant. So they were hesitant to invest millions of dollars in a bunch of phones until they could get it, and all the manufacturers said, well, it's going to be a couple of years. And so they strong-armed Microsoft into giving them 60,000 Windows phones at no cost. Because the thinking was, well, how hard is it? We got a police department that's been here since the 1850s and they've never used a smartphone. So going from no smartphone to a smartphone is probably a much harder lift than going from one smartphone to another. So they took the free phones, they trained all the officers and all the civilians, so all 55 or 60,000 people had one. And then when iPhone finally caught up and was CGIS compliant, they did the conversion and it worked exactly the way they thought it would. So they're very creative about not spending until they have to and then spending as little as they can. The result of this in the 2 years that I was in the Intelligence Bureau, we had incidents, I mean, all the time, but I never saw more than 5 computers get hit at any given time. It was absolutely astounding. So the way this worked was, at the time, the current New York City Police Commissioner, Jessica Tisch, she was at that time the assistant commissioner for IT. And she took clear choices from her information security leadership. She runs things with an iron fist. She's very, very strong-willed, and she's very reasonable. She worked for $1 a year, so there was no corruption there. There was no way to influence her from making things better, and that's what she set out to do. And she realized, I need to get really good people to tell me what I need in English, and then I'll have them do it. And so she had some advantages. It's always easier when you're in a paramilitary organization to force people to do things that they don't want to do. She used the allure of the NYPD to vendors to her great advantage because she could get trials that went on for a year. Because everybody wants to say that they sell to the NYPD. So, getting in there, that was a very interesting way that she had to get and try new things. But the way that she made sure that everybody stayed in line was just absolutely relentless policy enforcement. So they would make policies, they would test them out, and then once they launched them, that was the law. You weren't going to change it. She also, as the rubber met the road, she made sure something that the vast majority of companies don't do today, which is information security along with legal and IT, privacy. They're all involved from ideation stage. When they needed to build a new app, their product development process was that they would get everybody in the room and then they would build in security by design at the very beginning. This is what people today call shift left. She was left almost 10 years ago. She also made sure that information security signed off on all tech projects and all purchases. So, and with merciless enforcement of the violations. Very complex operation for a very complex city. Here's the director of information security at the time. This is Joseph, good friend of mine, colleague. I was sort of he was my opposite number in the IT bureau, and so we compared notes a lot. So he's currently the cybersecurity assistant commissioner for the whole agency. Back then he was just information security. Very mild-mannered, very polite, very honest. He would speak truth to power. He would only speak in the outcomes. He would never get technical unless you asked him to. He would just speak about, here's what our problem is, here's my proposal to solve it, and he would describe it in fairly high-level terms that a business person could understand. Never once did I hear him use fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But he was always years ahead of the game. So when there was an actual border gateway protocol attack, I think it was 2018, and we detected it, and he came to me and he was talking, and I'm like, I'd rather talk about the fact that you bought that BGP detection service 3 years ago. Like he always thought forward about the things, and he let the threat intelligence drive where he would spend his time and where he would exercise his discretion to expand the portfolio, manage the technical complexity. Everything was intelligence led, and he always believed in fundamentals over flash. And again, only the tools that we need. He had the great advantage that everybody wanted to work at the NYPD. It's a great place to start. You know, I only worked there for a couple of years. I'll dine out on that for the rest of my life. So he's able to pick the very best people, and he's able to train them and conduct disciplinary actions when people don't do what he needs them to do. It's a bit unique, but I had a similar situation at Chase Manhattan Bank in the late 1980s. So it's certainly not unique, and it's certainly not unique to government or the NYPD. The lesson that we learn from seeing this success that he had there, and this success that continues today, if you're an information security leader, you absolutely have to be a good communicator, and you have to be able to boil down really, really complex things into very, very clear choices. When you go in and you're talking to a leader, and this has to do with building things properly, because you don't get the opportunity to build things properly unless you explain why you need to. And so the only way to do that to non-technical executives is to get their buy-in. And the only way to do that is to be able to communicate in ways that they can understand. It is really important when you think about a career in security, and security is really an influencing job. You're very, very rarely do you have the kind of power that Jesse, Tish, and Joseph had to make people do what you want. Most of the time, you're trying to convince them to do the right thing. That's very, very difficult, especially if you speak in acronyms and compliance and rule set frameworks. Nobody cares about that stuff. They want to hear why you want them to do it, and they need you to explain it. They trust you to explain it until they realize that you can't. So information security leadership is translating the security requirements into language that people can understand, and then getting them to buy in, giving them clear choices. So a little bit about me. I did it this morning. It's pretty awful. 31 years of physical and cybersecurity work, mostly physical in the 90s, and then cyber from the early 2000s on. I've worked in public and private sector, and currently I'm at EPSD. Doesn't stand for anything. It's just a group of about 15 of us who consult. Like, if you see my face in a professional setting, something terrible has happened, and the CEO wants to know why. And our team is very, very good at figuring out what's going on, breaking Gordian knots, breaking out processes to figure out, where the problems are, and introducing new and better ways to do things. I also, as I say, public sector, in addition to the NYPD, I just retired after 15 years of law enforcement, mainly cyber investigations, quite a bit of human trafficking, and even organized retail crime. I've written a few textbooks, and I'm at work on a couple more. Almost wrote one with Gene, and we just couldn't get it to work for some scheduling issues. So in this talk today, what I'm talking about in three different parts, right? The first part is what I started with. You gotta speak clearly. You can't be more complex than Mother Goose. Anything that you do that isn't imparting the information in a way that the executive can understand it is wasting both of your time, and it's also very likely to not get you to leave the room with what you came for. So speaking clearly to power is very important if you want any of it yourself. And then security, really, it comes from good practices. I know it's not sexy. The results are very, very compelling. And I would go so far as to say it's almost impossible to do it unless you have good practices. And then finally, processes are what everything depends on. If the precursor is to get the good practices, the actual requirement for while it's working is process. Building things properly with good processes that include security in the very beginning, that's really all that shift left means. That's where I think people want to go. It's statistically proven to be associated with high performing companies. So I'm just going to say you should get there if you have any interest in a career in security. Okay, part one is speak simply and clearly. This guy right here is Clint Bruce. He was He was the commander of SEAL Team 5, first team into Afghanistan after 9/11. Old friend, and I asked him one day, what's the strategy? How do you lead a SEAL team? And this is what he said to me right off the top of his head. Love the boys, explain the mission, don't be a detriment to the fighting. And that's pretty darn deep. Each one of those things is actually really quite profound. He's a big proponent of making things as simple as they can possibly be. You really don't want to conflate the fact that in security you're dealing with a lot of complex inputs with the job that you're doing, right? You have to understand the complex stuff, but that doesn't mean that when you're describing it, you should lapse into complexity. You really shouldn't. If was it Einstein who said, if you can't explain to a 6-year-old, you don't really understand it? Like, you really have to transcend acronyms, numbers, the kinds of things that we all love. Another thing that happens in the security space is a lot of people want to sort of, be junior James Bonds. They want to use military expressions all the time. It's really not about that. It's really about outcomes. It's really about the business. So you want to define strategy and make sure that you're actually speaking strategically. But this is a strategy that I just made up on the spot today, right? Help executives take better and better informed risks to achieve better results. Enable the teams to safely build stuff, defend against known bad, detect and stop previously unknown bad. Don't make it any more complex than it needs to be. You might not even need all of that for a strategy, but when you're describing what your mission is, you should be able to boil it down to something like that. And nobody needs an advanced degree to understand what I just said. I thought this was a picture of Nathan Topansky. It's not, but whatever. Looks enough like him that I'm going to leave it in there. I showed it to him earlier and he laughed. This is a very simple strategic statement, right? If we don't carefully secure our wallet, bad people will steal our money. He said that to me one day when he worked for me in like 2018, 2019, 2020 in Paxos. We were doing cryptocurrency. We had about $19 billion of assets under custody. And he was describing what our mission was. I thought it was a pretty good way to say it. The reason is that our job is not to take risks. A lot of times people think that the information security managers or leaders are there to accept risk on behalf of the company. They're not. They're there to understand the risk and be able to articulate it clearly and cleanly to an executive in terms that allows them to understand and have a choice of whether to accept or transfer or treat or avoid a risk that you're talking about. But it's their call. They're the ones who are taking on the risk. So in order to do that, they have to understand what you're talking about. They have to understand the outcome that you're a proponent of, or they won't do it. And oftentimes when you go in to a room to meet with a senior leader, a lot of stuff is on the line, and you're seeing a hazard that they might not have recognized. And it really is your job to be able to explain this in a way that's understandable, not to you, but to them. They're not technical. They think in business outcomes. The way you describe the risk, you have to meet them where they are, or you're just losing them. Simple, again, easy to understand, clear concepts and options. They like to have options, even if you're only giving them 2 options. If you do this right, what you're doing is you're explaining the inputs, you're explaining the conditions, and then you're giving them we could do this, or we can do this, and you want to make this, the first one, whatever it was, the most obvious one. That should be the most obvious choice. So you got to be really compelling. This is Wendy Nather, and she always says that when you're talking to executives and when you're talking to managers, get them to tell you what they think that the outcome is. And if you get them to do that, even if you said the same thing, they wouldn't believe you as much as when they say it. Once they say it, now it's their idea. And so now they're going to get behind, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to see. So you want to set and reach meaningful goals. And so you want to get them to tell you what their goals are so that you can support them. The prioritization, I think you'll see this a lot, and sort of information security professionals with less experience will try to prioritize things. And that's always the wrong way to go. What you need to do is be able to enumerate them. You can stack rank them by I don't know, criticality, by severity, by impact, whatever it is that you want to do, but you're not prioritizing what you're going to do and when. That is a business decision. And so you need to be able to lobby effectively. the worst thing is if you just write policy and you're just a bureaucrat and I'm just going to force people to read it. It's much more effective if you can work with the business to get them the outcomes that they want. Then they will look at you as a partner. If you're just that guy who gives them painful things to listen to and makes them sad and confused, you're always leaving the room empty-handed. You also want to write clear guidelines for teams when you're describing how to reach these goals. You want to help people help you. You want to help people understand the kinds of things that they should look out for by giving them guidelines and by holding things like office hours, meeting people where they are. I enjoy embedding information security engineers into engineering teams or product teams, because then when you start to get to know a human being and then suddenly you've had a problem and they're able to solve it, you stop being the team of Dr. No, and you start being the team that sends people to help me do my job. And that's a great position to be in. This is Andy Ellis. He's another former CISO, now retired. This, I believe, is very profound. He told me this about 5 years ago. Biggest mistake he sees CISOs make is that prioritization. When you go out and you do some kind of enumeration of something and you find a bunch of findings, you find some hazards, whatever it is you're finding, everything on your list needs to be fixed. So when you make a prioritization list, that's kind of a waste of time. You want to go to every business leader and say, here, these are the 10 things that I need to do. Which of these things should I do first because it would help you accomplish something that you want? Get them to do that. That's your priority right there. A lot of times you will hear this sentence, InfoSec enables the business. It is so rare to find a chief information security officer who really takes this to heart. We enable the business by saying no. We enable the business by not letting them do that. That's not the way it works. And certainly compliance, which is a necessary part of being a chief information security officer or security manager, even a security engineer, you've got to comply. You've got to get people to help you comply. That's not what drives the business. I am a real proponent of I want to be compliant by virtue of my great security. I do not want to try to achieve great security by being compliant. Rule sets don't make you secure. They make you compliant. So understanding that that compliance isn't driving the business, but making the business safe and secure so that they can take better risks, they can take more risks, they can be comfortable in taking risks because they know that you're not just making it secure, you're also making it safe so that they can't make a mistake, right? That is something that really does drive business. Use that principle as often as you can. Contextualize the findings in business terms. If you find that your CEO likes sports, use sports analogies if you know how to do it. Find ways to connect using different means to get to the bottom line of the message and get your point across. This is kind of one of those in the trenches lessons learned. When you get a job or when you get transferred into a job, the first thing that I would recommend that you do is take a look at the security team and start to understand what's your mission and just ask questions, but go bottom up and be systematic about it. You want to figure out two things. You want to figure out what your mission and your strategy is, and you want to figure out what you actually do every day, and you want to figure out the relationship between those things, right? What is the strategy? Does anybody know the strategy? This is a very common thing, not just in security, but in engineering, even in business. They'll make a strategy, but go up and ask a lot of the employees in whatever department. They won't actually know what the strategies are. So figure out, do you know what it is? And when you're reading it, does it actually clearly set forth what your mission is, why you're all doing this? Is it realistic? Can you achieve these goals? Or does it have like pablum in there, like we're going to be the leading blah, blah, blah. We're going to be the number one blah. We're going to dominate the market for, these aren't strategic statements, right? A strategy, as my colleague Sarah always says, a good piece of strategy will allow you to imagine doing it the other way, right? It's a way of describing where you're going to go and what you want to achieve. It leaves out all the tactics. So look at your strategy. Is it telling you where you want to go? And can you imagine the path to get there just by looking at the strategic statement? Or is this actually just a collection of tactics? We're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. It's very important that you understand what you've got because that is telling you what you're supposed to do every day. Next thing you want to do is, does it? Are you doing the things that people are expecting you to do based on your strategic statements? Or are you not? Enumerate all the different things that you're actually doing, and what you're going to be looking for are the things that don't support your mission, and even worse, things that don't support information security at all, or physical. Obviously, I'm not trying to rule out anything, but like a very common thing. I mentioned that compliance is a reality. A very common thing in businesses across the world actually is whenever somebody wants to buy your product or service, do business with you, you're going to get the spreadsheet from hell. You're going to get the cat rodeo. You're going to get 300 questions in an Excel spreadsheet that look like they've been being compiled since the 1990s. They're asking questions about firewall management and things like that, and data centers, and all this stuff. But there's hundreds and hundreds of questions, and this is considered to be third-party risk management. And in order to win the business that your company wants to win, they have to answer all these questions. And all the salespeople look at each other like, I don't even understand what this is. And ultimately, somebody will end up coming to the security department. And if you're not careful, you're going to end up owning that. Be careful. Don't own that. That is not an information security task. That it doesn't even require information security subject matter expertise. What it is a sales task. And nobody in the sales team wants it. Frankly, I don't want it either. But what you have to do is take a look at the fact that in information security, as with anything else, anything you do is done at the zero-sum expense of everything else you could possibly do. So if you are spending a double-digit percentage of your time answering cat rodeo spreadsheets, the exact amount of time that you're spending on that is time that you're not actually securing your organization or thinking about it. If you find that you're stuck with that, get rid of it. It is very hard. You can do it. I do it all the time. In fact, I get rid of those spreadsheets all the time. Until you do it, also your team is going to feel demoralized. They're going to feel like they don't have any agency, that people aren't listening to them, that they're ending up doing things that they didn't plan on doing. They're going to start hating life, and you also might just fail at your bigger mission, right? An existential breach that because you didn't have time because you were answering spreadsheets. That's a really bad look, and there's nobody but yourself to blame if you're the executive who said, okay, I'll take that to be nice, or I'll take that to be helpful. All right, that was communication. The next thing is about good practices fueling security. I'm saying 80%, like it might not be the most important 80%, but it's certainly 80%, like showing up is half the battle. You really just, what do you got? How's it configured? When does it change? If you know that, you're really far down the road of doing things well. But what you really want to do is make it easy for people to do the right thing, especially engineering and product if you're in a tech company. But whatever it is, even anybody in the organization, what you want to do is make practices that support and make it easy for people to do the right thing. If you make it hard, if you haven't documented it properly, if you're not explaining the task well, if you're not telling people why they're doing things and getting, as you said, it's an influencing job, right? Why do we have all this stuff that we're doing? If you're not doing that, it's very, very difficult to succeed at information security. And with engineering maturity, you really want to understand where you are. Where are you? How long does it take you to push a line of code out of a laptop into production? Is it possible to avoid the CI pipeline? Like, these are all engineering maturity questions, and you should be able to know what to do with those answers. What kind of tech debt are we struggling under the burden of? And how does that affect people's ability to do the right thing, right? If they're battling and coding around jank all day long, they probably don't actually have time to care about anything other than the product that their boss told them that they have to do, the feature that they had to deliver, the executives want them to do, and figuring out how to get it done in the time allotted, because those deadlines are usually very, very tight, artificially tight. You're not getting them to do anything other than that. So you want to figure out where you stand, and then only then can you come up with better practices that can foster better behavior. Same with delivery maturity. How are you doing things? How do your teams work, and how do they deliver? And what does that look like? And then finally, a huge problem that people have is around knowledge management. By that, what I mean is if you're not doing active communication, right? I can't tell you if you've got jobs now, or if you have had jobs, or whatever it is, get a chance to look in the company Confluence. Take a look at, um, go into some documents that are key to how people are supposed to do things, and take a look at the number of people who've actually read it and compare that to the total number of people in the company. It is very frequent that you will find that very, very, very few people are reading anything. But writing a Confluence document feels like you've done it. You've succeeded. Active communication is, you're delivering something, you're making sure that they've received it, you're answering questions, you're reinforcing the message within it. You're not just throwing it over and dropping a document or throwing it over the wall. And so all of these things are very, very important for you to figure out what is the workload that you're going to have to engage in order to foster better practices. Kelly Shortridge is wonderful. The practices that you've adopted for software quality uphold reliability, reliability is good, and apply to security as well. This is a really important thing to say, because as soon as you deviate from a known practice that people do and you try to get them to do something new, that's where you've lost them. If you can figure out ways that you can just move by 3 degrees to the right or left, what they're doing now, in order to accommodate something that will give you a very big security lift, that's how you want to do it. You want to infiltrate processes that people already do and just add a step, add a half step, add a check, add a test. If you start from scratch, you're just going to fail. People will, they'll just ignore you unless you can make them do it. You want to find those natural intersections between the processes that exist and the things that you want to accomplish. And then it'll make it easier for people to do the right thing. This is Sarah. I mentioned her before. Don't forget, the percentage of orphaned software in organizations is often quite surprising, because people don't remember that once you built it, somebody's got to own it. Somebody has responsibility for it. Support and maintenance is actually the cost of doing business. It's not extra. It's part of it. It's part of the overall cost of ownership. So you got to upkeep, not just build. And that's a practice that you have to help inculcate. And what you really want to make sure also is that people understand information security often doesn't own the resource that needs to be updated, fixed, tested, looked at. That's got to be with a team that owns it. So you need to build into the processes of building things decisions and decision records and architectural decision records, so that when you're not there, people can follow the reasoning. What did we decide? How did we decide it? Who decided it? What were the other alternatives, and why did we pick this way? That way, 5 years from now, when there's a whole new team, they're not going to get lost. We were just talking today, if you want to figure out if you're doing it right, your decision records, bring somebody who's unrelated to a project in, have them look at it and tell you what you're doing. That's a great way to find out if you're doing decision records correctly or not. You have to be good stewards. You have to foster an environment where people who build apps are good stewards of the app once it's built. And Tanya Janka, I never actually met her personally, but put InfoSec at the beginning. It's so important. Shift left is just a fancy way of saying this. When people say that, I have noticed that a lot of people who say shift left don't actually mean what they think they mean. So it's probably easier to just say, include information security, legal, and privacy at the beginning from the ideation stage. You would be stunned at how often this saves time and money, right? What is it? It's $1 to fix it on the drawing board. It's $1,000 to fix it when we're working on it. It's $1 million to fix it after it's in production. Just bring the right people to the meeting. And it's not just these people. There's other people, up and downstream dependency, teams that make up and downstream dependencies that your new thing is going to count on. They should be there too, right? Oh, what you're suggesting doesn't work. You don't want to find that out after you've already built stuff. Try to get things as early as you can, and make sure if you can get onto, and you should be able to get onto the launch checklist. The worst thing you're ever going to hear is, oh yeah, we forgot to do that. And you're like, well, it's kind of critical because you're in Europe and there's a GDPR regulation that all of this stuff is not just encrypted at rest and in transit, but also stored in Belgium, right? Well, we already launched it into production, so we'll just get to it when we do an update. No, they won't. They won't. It really has to be done as you launch it. So you want to adapt the product development process to make sure that that is included, getting these stakeholders in at the beginning. Nicole Forsgren is a co-author of Accelerate, one of the best books in the world about if you're familiar with the DORA metrics, which are used to those statistics I mentioned that are correlated, statistically significantly correlated with high performing companies. And they say right in the book, right? We want to make it easier for developers to do the right thing when it comes to information security. As it turns out, building things properly is the way that you do that. But what they're also saying is you need to give people the starter kit. Make it easy. Give them the pre-approved libraries, give them the tools that they need, give them the things that they're going to be looking for so that they don't have to recreate the wheel. This is right up there with, the day that engineers start, or even accounting people start, when they lift up the lid of the laptop, everything that they need in terms of applications and access to the data for their job and their role should be right on there. That's the way it should work. And it's the same with information security. You don't want to make them hunt for this stuff. I would go farther and say that you really want to build in those things, plus make sure that your automated testing and your code review and your penetration testing, make sure that all of that stuff is really easy. Processes include sections and time for that. The product development process, or the new product introduction process, includes time to think about those things. What are the tests that we will need? When will we need them? How long do they realistically take? You know that you're dealing with somebody who hasn't done this if what they've done is they've scheduled the pen test for the Monday after the code was supposed to be finished, and they've left a week because then they're going into production. That's somebody who's not thinking about the actual needs of how these tests work and how engineering works. Okay, that was that. So now we're into process. If the information is born of building things properly, this is how you start to build things properly. I want to give you a real world example. This is where we're going to ask the questions. Don't shout it out, but put it into the chat if you want. This is a real world example taken from the last year and a half. There were some problems with the product development process. These people are not stupid. They're very, very good at their job. And it took a long, long time to figure this out. It can be very, very difficult because look, if you've got a product and it's working, or a product that, and you're not getting things done, going back to a process that you've already established and authorized, it's not the most obvious thing in the world, right? You're much more likely to look for causes of whatever technical manifestation that the problem took, not the process itself. So this was real. It's just an excerpt from that process. So step one, well, it's like step 51, whatever. Gather the product requirements, check with upstream and downstream dependencies, create your product plan, bring your engineering stakeholders to the table, talk about timing and prioritization, what's most important to all the different stakeholders. And as I say, this is one excerpt. There were other areas where they bring in other people. Estimate the effort that it's going to take, and then allocate the engineering resources to the project, and begin actually putting it in the calendar and say, all right, well, this is going to take this number of sprints, and I'm going to need this many engineers for this number of sprints. So you start to block out that time, and then you solidify that, and then perform a RFC and have the engineering leaders who are going to be on this project take a look at and really get down into the nuts and bolts. Like, what are we going to build? Who's going to build it? Who's going to manage it? All those questions that I've mentioned a few of them already that you have to work out. So where's the problem? There is one. And if you want to just throw it into the open questions, I'm just going to give this a minute or so. Not seeing any answers, and that's not, it's not surprising. I mean, as I say, diabolically difficult to troubleshoot. I'll give this another like 30 seconds. If anybody has an idea, you can just throw it into that open question thing. They are allocating engineering resources before they figured out what they're going to build. this was a real head scratcher. And they were failing in so many goals because of that. It was just a really simple thing. They would say, I need 2 engineers for 4 sprints when they needed 3 engineers for 5 sprints. So they didn't have enough people to do the job because the product requirements grew after staffing allocation, and they were allocating to 100% of their engineers. These are the kinds of things that you want to look for. You want to look at process. Process is everything. What was his name? Big Bill Knudsen, the guy who ran General Motors and then ran the U.S. War effort in World War II. He said, speed isn't important. It's accuracy that's important, and you only get accurate by getting your process right. This is CI/CD. This is the way modern software is built. It's all process. So when you find the process problem, that's when you fix the actual problem. By the way, after they fixed that problem, their completion rates just soared. They more than doubled over the 6 months that followed, because that was just the problem. I want to actually say that as an information security person, it might seem, well, it's a hammer, I'm a hammer, and that's a nail. Incident response is, I don't know any of you. There's a bunch of you here. I'm just going to bet you all a 6-pack of Dr. Pepper that whatever incident response process you have is probably bad, and it probably is incomplete. And it could be incomplete because it doesn't include executives on the initial triage team. It doesn't include communications. You haven't done enough tabletop exercises and simulations. You haven't gotten one of those ring lights and put it up against the CEO and start asking him questions like a reporter. There's all sorts of things that you can do. But in this case, what we're talking about is like, how do your teams declare an incident? Because a lot of companies are like, well, there's security incidents and then there's engineering incidents. They sometimes even go on and specify that an engineering incident is about availability, right? A service outage, but a security incident is about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And they don't understand that they're using the same word. When you get your incident response process correct, it is rocket fuel for your velocity, and it is concrete for your platform. It makes everything much more stable. And I'll tell you why. If you get it right, there's enough people responding and enough multidisciplinary expertise to look at things and not let people not learn the lessons of the last incident that we did. You come to me with an incident that was the same root cause as the one last week, I'm going to be very upset. So that's what your incident response process is supposed to do. It's supposed to find the things that were wrong, learn the lessons. When your engineering teams are like, no, it's an engineering outage, I got this. So here's the way this works, right? Somebody writes some janky code, somebody writes some, maybe it's not their fault, right? Maybe it's around tech debt, whatever. They've written some code that's fragile. Now, in any outage, in the early minutes, even hours sometimes of an outage, you can't tell if it's a software problem, if it's an infrastructure problem, a connectivity problem, or actually a guy with a hoodie trying to hack you. So we really recommend that you surge this multidisciplinary group so that at least you've got people in the room. Best performing companies do this, right? You bring a lot of different eyes to it. You come up with the problem, you triage the problem. Anybody who needs to leave can leave. Anybody who is staying is actually working on the incident. You also troubleshoot and triage much faster, and you prioritize much faster. So if we go back to the engineering guys, they're like, oh, okay, I have an outage. I know why. I think I know why. Yeah, it's that routine, it's that thing, whatever it is. They go in there, they fix it, and then the service is back up. If you keep doing that, because it's going to crash again. You keep doing that, you keep not learning, and you keep not fixing the actual root cause. So this keeps happening over and over again. One must take control of this process. And you need to speak in the business terms, right? We need to surge, triage, handle, report, learn, disseminate, teach, and reinforce over and over. You want to just say that over and over again, because as I say, if you find something that hasn't been fixed once, you're gonna get a little grumpy. But if it hasn't been fixed twice, it's actually going to be a disciplinary thing. Why are you not fixing the problem? Because I want to reduce the frequency and impact of incidents across the company. I want to get better at this. I don't want to just keep running out the fire department and putting out little fires, then going back. It's very, very expensive, and it's just dumb. So another thing in process is how you are prioritizing. Very common. I get a new vulnerability scanner and I put it in. Now I've got 9,000 criticals. Uh-oh. I understand that the tool's telling you that it's critical. It might not be critical in your environment. It might not actually be as bad as they think. It could be worse, right? You need to understand what your conditions on the ground are, and you have to look at these things systematically, and you have to understand what you're seeing. But if you've got a new tool and you've put this in, and suddenly you're in this position, you have to do this systematically and sustainably. So that's super important. A similar and related thing is visibility. I'll just say this: if you can't see it, it's going to hurt you if it hasn't already. So what is in your log pipeline? Starting with, and this is very common also, how do you decide what logs are in your log pipeline? How do you decide what the sources are and what content is coming from out of each one of those sources? In many, if not most companies, this is left up to the engineering manager in charge of whatever that is. And when you tell them that they have to log things, they're just going to be like, oh, okay, I don't know, I'm just going to log everything. This is how you get secrets. This is how you get things that you don't want to have logged, get into the logs. It's also very, very expensive. It's also really unhelpful. And so what you want to do as soon as you can, get into the process of your entire log pipeline and think of it as a lifeline to you getting better at your job and seeing things. If, again, can't see it, it's going to hurt you. So fix the blind spots. See what you can see. This often is an opportunity to save a lot of money too. You will find duplication of effort. You will find duplication of tools. You'll find duplication of log sources. You'll find duplication of data lakes. You'll also find, probably if you have compliance issues, HIPAA, GDPR, you're going to find issues there too in your log pipeline. Very, very important to get those processes right. Once it's humming, it is absolutely fantastic. And it's very difficult to catch you out if you can see things that are moving. These kinds of issues that I'm talking about, you need to come up with a way of handling it in a sustainable way. That systemic and sustainable is super important. Yeah, you've got 9,000 criticals. Yes, those things have to be addressed. Do not start pulling people off that. Let's think about how we got to 9,000 criticals. Let's think, like, how did we get, for a total of what, 15,000 total vulnerability? How is that happening? What's not happening? Certainly they're not doing testing. Certainly we don't have our engineers trained in at least the OWASP top 10, which is only that because their engineers don't care or know enough to get into the OWASP top 11. 10 is about anybody's concentration level in engineering. So what you want to do is find the root causes of these things while you are creating new processes in order to tackle the backlog. Give yourself a reasonable amount of time, but what you really want to do is stop the bleeding, stop new accumulation of things, and start to burn down that backlog over a realistic period of time. And during that time, iterate on your new process for doing with this, and you will find that you can reduce all of this patch management from something that absolutely everybody dreads and nobody wants to own to something that's a very, very small lift, because you can actually scan every week. You can scan every couple of days, because each time you run a scan, you're only going to find a few things distributed amongst all your different teams. Make the product managers own your patching. If there are vulnerabilities in your product and the product manager doesn't own responsibility for patching them, who does? Because it's not me. I can't do it. I'm just the CISO. I can't. You've got to find a way that somebody takes responsibility and disseminates these small packages of vulnerabilities. Once they get used to it, it only takes single-digit months, you'll never look back. Finally, remove the foot guns. I've been talking about making things easy to do the right thing. Don't make people forage to find the right way. You got to make it obvious and simple and easy. Be repetitive. Teach them what they're doing. Make the processes support this. Especially go back into those old postmortems. A lot of people are good at writing postmortems, just not learning from them. Go in and look at them. Find incidents that have find things that have been caused by similar process breaches. Fix those processes. It's a really great way to find the processes that don't work. I've mentioned this earlier. Adapt the extant workflows. Do not try to make brand new ones unless it's just never been done, and then you got to start from scratch. And finally, here's a huge mistake that a lot of people make. Like, no, this is the way that we have to do it. It's a golden road. You've got to be on the golden road. The problem is that your lower performing teams, and there always are lower performing teams, they won't be able to achieve the standards of the golden road. They won't. But if you don't give them a bronze and silver road, you've just told them it's all or nothing. And in that case, all they have to do is nothing. So you really want to make this something where there is a built-in and very obvious and very easy path to continuous improvement to get toward that golden road. And then you start to raise the standards across the organization. So to sum this up, I think I'm on time. Master the three things: communicate well, enumerate and fix all of the practices that you have to support the better outcomes, and do the same thing, enumerate and fix your processes that make it easy for everybody to do the right thing by default without having to forage for it. And that is my presentation.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
If you have questions, please post them into the Q&A. I'll say while we're waiting to see if anybody posts anything. I think the single sort of takeaway I get from this, which we've actually, several of the people you quoted have spoken in the series, is that cookie cutter solutions don't work. They're a great place to start maybe planning.
Yep.
Maybe not great, but reasonable place. But you have to understand your audience, your context, and tailor them accordingly. Does that, you think that's a reasonable summary of what you said?
Oh, I really do. I really do. Yeah, it's like, you go to Claude or ChatGPT, you ask it how to do something, and you get that first answer. I mean, only a fool with no regard for the outcome would just take that. But that's the cookie cutter. And from there, you can start relatively easily to adapt that thing to the conditions on the ground that you're aware of. And then you start bringing in other voices to take a look at it and improve it. And then you take it on a trial. I always, by the way, when you come up with a new process or a new process component, I find it really good to find that there are in almost every organization engineering managers, principal engineers, staff engineers who are very dedicated to this. They really they want to like it, and you'll find them because they'll identify themselves to you when you say something. They're going to be the ones who comment on something that you said it at all hands, right? They're your test bed. They're the people. It's like, all right, I want to try this new process. We're doing this right now with SAST. We had a SAST failure about a year ago, and we're redoing the SAST process. And part of the thing that we realized was that a lot of the engineers were getting frustrated by the choices that they were being given. And it was kind of, again, there was no bronze or silver. And so now we're making our mistakes with this group of teams that report to this one engineer who's a real enthusiast and a real evangelist. And we'll do that for a couple of months and work out the kinks and fix the process. Then we'll start a soft launch, and then we'll start the hard launch. It always takes longer than you think to get things done. But if you take that time to get it right, then as soon as it launches, it's going to start giving you value almost immediately.
Yeah, and I think a second issue here is that coming in with the attitude that you have all the answers before you even know what the questions are is a bad idea. And
again, we shouldn't have to say it.
Yeah, that's pretty much true for everything. But especially in a realm like this, if you come in and start implementing things without knowing what the questions are that need to be addressed, yeah, you're as likely to screw things up as you are to fix things.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff with information security is around discovery. And I'm guilty of this too, right? You do it enough, you start to see things, you put some things together, you want to jump to a conclusion. Just avoid it. Like, try as hard as you can to wait till the evidence is in, to wait till you see everything. Because when you get surprised, it's not just that you're surprised and you were wrong, it's also that you lose a lot of credibility. And you can build that credibility up for years, and you can lose it in an afternoon when you're just fundamentally dumb wrong. You say that something is much more serious than it is, that's when people stop trusting you.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions, and so
it's either good or bad. So I'll decide it's good.
I think that people can't really argue with your points. So we'll take it as a win, and we've reached the end of our time slot here. I would like to encourage everyone who's tuned in to tune in again next week for our next speaker. You can see on the webpage the talks we have scheduled throughout the remainder of the semester. And I am so thankful, Nick, that you were able to take the time in a different time zone. Our audience may not realize this, but through the wonders of the internet, Nick is speaking to us from Europe. And it's late in the evening for him, but he stayed up late, gave us this talk, and we are hoping that you'll be able to visit us in person before too much longer goes by. We'll look forward to some occasion. We'll celebrate when you get here. But for everybody who's tuned in, if you're enrolled this semester, good luck. Have a wonderful semester. For our visitors who are just tuning in, thank you for visiting. Do come back. And if you're in the industry and would be interested in giving a talk, drop us a line. So with that said, thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.